Hey, what's up, guys? Gons here for the Face Like the Sun channel. I just wanted to publish a quick video, a quick update on a couple articles, as well as letting everybody know that the conference is coming up here in October. It'll be October 10th through the 13th in Irvine, California, at the Hilton, right across the street from John Wayne Airport. Hear the Watchman, Disclosure on the Coast, Prophecy Unveiled. This is the first Hear the Watchman conference out here in Orange County, and it's going to be a good time. Now, here's the thing. Usually you have a conference and, that's it. You have the conference. But there's a lot more going on in that general vicinity. And what I mean by that literally is less than 5 miles from where we're having our conference for Hear the Watchman, the Unbelievable Conference, live in LA, even though technically it's in Orange County, is happening on the same weekend. And of course, Unbelievable, if you've never heard of the podcast Unbelievable, that would be unbelievable to me, but they're one of the best apologetics, debate, and conversation podcasts out there. Justin Briley's the guy who runs it, and he actually promoted Age of Deceit on his podcast many, many years ago when it was first published on YouTube in 2011. So I reached out to him again just to say, hey, if your audience wants something else to do, because the Unbelievable Conference is Friday night and all day Saturday. So Hear the Watchman happens Thursday night for a meet and greet, all day Friday, all day Saturday, and pretty much all day Sunday. And you're going to have John Lennox and J. Warner Wallace, who will be speaking at the Unbelievable Conference, again, right down the street from where we're going to be having our conference for Hear the Watchman. So that's a lot of Christians in the general Newport, Costa Mesa, Irvine area down here in Orange County. But if that wasn't enough, I don't know what is the deal with October 12th, but I guess everybody wants to do a conference because the Naked Bible Conference 2019 Dallas, Texas is also happening on October 12th, 2019. However, the Naked Bible Conference is in Dallas, Texas. So the only thing Mike did wrong was have it in Texas instead of Orange County. It would have been a crazy thing to have all three of those things going on in the same vicinity. But hey, 2 out of 3, not bad. So I'm excited to be there and hang out with everybody and meet everybody. My presentation will be on October 12th at 9 a.m. As of now, it's titled Omega Indicators, Biblical Analysis of Current Events and Near Future Predicaments for the Church. And I'll be summarizing and trying to encapsulate all the topics that we discuss on this channel and the Canary Cry Radio podcast, the Canary Cry Newstalk podcast, and all the subjects that we touch on in a way that is cohesive and in a way that helps us analyze what's happening today all around us. And speaking of which, let me get into the article that I wanted to touch on because it lists a couple new companies that we haven't mentioned before, but should keep an eye on as part of this whole process because obviously, as the article states, DARPA has supported them financially. So this is theguardian.com under Science, Our Brain Implants the Future of Thinking. And of course, on this channel, we've discussed the relevance or importance of the brain-computer interface technology as it relates to a prophetic reality manifesting before us. Not just mind control, but an actual mark of the beast system. And it's just so unique in terms of human history. We've never had anything like this, where we have a machine in a box, and we can now start to connect our brain to it. I mean, this is just a completely new realm compared to what recorded history tells us has happened, other than, of course, the biblical narrative, which is much more rooted in supernaturalism and the metaphysical realities that intertwine with our physical creation. But the article here follows a guy named Dennis DeGray, and a couple years ago, he sent a text message using just his mind, and so people have referenced him before. DeGray is 66 years old. He's paralyzed from the collarbones down, and he was able to send a message from his brain because in 2016, he had 2 tiny squares of silicon with protruding metal electrodes surgically implanted in his motor cortex, the part of the brain that controls movement. And this article is really in-depth, and I recommend you guys read it. But the things I just want to highlight from the article, the program was called BrainGate, and I feel like we've talked about BrainGate in the past, but maybe not. I don't know. It rang a bell when I read it here. But obviously, the idea of developing systems where you can go straight from the mind to some sort of communication system, which allows you to connect to another mind without saying a word, telepathy basically through the computer network. That kind of research for super soldiers and stuff like that, that's been going on for a long time. So we're not naive to these things becoming more and more commercial, or at least having people who are paralyzed to test these types of technologies, because why not? Everybody has free will. If they want to, they can. And that's what I'm talking about. It's crazy to even think that. We're living in sci-fi world already, in a sense. But of course, the deployment of that technology to the masses, that's going to be a whole different level of things. So we just have to keep an eye on this kind of stuff. But it says here that the system is not wireless. So this thing that he has in his brain, it's not wireless. A socket protrudes from his skull through which wires take the signal to computers for decoding by machine learning algorithms. Oh, great. We got to connect to these machine learning algorithms for them to decipher what's taking place in our neurons, and so as to translate that information into some sort of communicable medium for all of us to communicate. There you go, straight from the brain to the computer to other brains. And of course, the fact that this is in Utah has another point of data to mention, which is the Utah data center. One of the biggest data centers in the world happens to be in Utah. So what is really going on? Maybe there's some kind of dark sci-fi underground thing happening with some of these people who are tapping into the largest database that we have in the world to collect whatever information they're mining for. It says here that barely a couple of dozen people have been implanted with Utah Array worldwide. Great progress has been made, says Lee Hochberg, a neurologist at Massachusetts General Hospital and an engineering professor at Brown University, who co-directs the BrainGate program. But, quote, a system that patients can use around the clock that reliably provides complete, rapid, intuitive brain control over a computer does not yet exist, says them. But then they talk about Facebook, Silicon Valley, their interest in it. Elon Musk, obviously, with Neuralink. We've talked about that. A lot of people have touched on that, where you still have to sew in to the brain via robots. So not the greatest thing there, but super futuristic. Kind of reminds me of the Darth Vader scene there where they take off the helmet there. But anyway, here's what I wanted to mention. There are smaller rival startups too. Paradromics, like Neuralink, is focused on many more and smaller electrodes, but is aiming for an even higher density of probes over the face of its neural implant. In form, their device would look closer to the Utah Array, a bed of needles with metal electrodes, and there would be no robotic surgery. Quote, we want to hit the market as soon as possible, says co-founder CEO Matt Engel, adding, the hope is to begin a clinical trial by the early 2020s. The company has raised about $25 million in funding to date, including significant amounts from the Pentagon's research agency DARPA, ding ding ding, which grew interest in BCIs after it realized the sophisticated robot limbs it was building for injured soldiers returning from overseas needed brain control. And there's a picture there of the guy, Dennis DeGray, with his brain implants, again, paralyzed from the neck down, but able to control objects using the same motor portions of his brain. And here's another company, Synchron, based in Australia and Silicon Valley, has a different approach. The company, which has received $21 million in funding to date, including some from DARPA, last week revealed that the first clinical trial of its Stentrode device has begun in Australia, ahead of both Neuralink and Paradromics. There you go. You have this company in Australia jumping the gun. It's interesting. It's like an arms race that's basically taking place when it comes to these technologies being available on the open market. And it says here the device avoids open brain surgery and scarring because it is inserted using a stent through a vein in the back of the neck. Matrix, anyone? Once in position next to the motor cortex, the stent splays out to embed 16 metal electrodes into the blood vessel's walls from which neuronal activity can be recorded. So far in the trial, one patient paralyzed with motor neuron disease has been implanted with 4 other sets to follow. The device's safety will be studied along with how well the system allows brain control of computer for typing and texting. While it can only read the aggregate activity of a population of neurons, of which it takes in about 1,000, there is enough data to make a system useful for patients, and less nuance in the signal actually makes it more suitable and robust, says the founder and CEO Tom Oxley. And I have a couple other quotes here from the article that I found interesting. Quote, no one is going to be super impressed with the startup companies until they start recording their lifetimes in years. The Utah Array has a lot of issues, but you do measure its lifetime in years, says Cynthia Shetek, a neural interface researcher at the University of Michigan. Then, even if we are able to record all these extra neuron signals, could we decode them? quote, "We have no idea how the brain works," end quote, says Takashi Kozai, a biomedical engineer at the University of Pittsburgh who studies implantable technologies. Okay. Takashi says, we have no idea how the brain works. He's a biomedical engineer at the University of Pittsburgh who studies implantable technologies, looking at the brain going, I don't know, it's just a thing of flesh. Quote, "Trying to decode that information and actually produce something useful is a huge problem," end quote. Chestek agrees, and more understanding of how neurons compute things would be helpful, but, quote, "Every algorithm out there would suddenly just start doing better with a few hundred extra neurons." And back to this guy Oxley, who says, quote, "If the technology becomes safe, it's easy to use, and it provides you with superior technology control, there will be people who want to pay for that." And I actually agree with him. I think that's why we're going to live in some crazy bizarro world where people are jacked into the freaking internet with their brains directly, and it's going to just be really creepy. I think it's going to be really creepy. Anyway, a couple more quotes here. This one was the one that I tweeted out. I thought this was interesting. "If the technology were to make it outside the medical domain, the military is where we might see it first," says Dr. Hannah Maslin, deputy director of the University of Oxford's Uhiro Center for Practical Ethics. For example, it might provide silent communication between soldiers or allow activation of equipment by the thinking of certain commands. It is hard to see most people opting to undergo surgical intervention for recreational or convenience uses, she added, but at a recent neurotechnology meetup in San Francisco of about 24 tinkerers, Jonathan Tumim argued it was a logical next step. Quote, "We already use devices, our smartphones, that offload a lot of our cognition and augment our memory." He's telling us what's happening. Mr. Neurotechnology Meetup guy in San Francisco and a self-identified tinkerer, according to this article, is saying that smartphones are already offloading our cognition and augmenting our memory. My goodness. This is just bringing the bandwidth between the human brain and those to a higher level, said the self-described neuroscientist, engineer, entrepreneur, and environmentalist who makes his own neurofeedback gear. And later says, who owns the brain data and what is it being used for? And brain jacking, where a third party could gain control of the system and modify it in ways the brain's owner has not consented to, is rooted in reality rather than science fiction, says Maslin. Pacemakers have been hacked before. And, of course, could this type of data be used in court in some way in the future? Of course it can. Further ethical issues arise around control and agency. If a brain implant doesn't get your intention right, to what extent are you as the user of the device responsible for what is said or done? And how do we ensure that if a technology confers significant benefits, it is not just the rich who get it? All these types of questions have always been around, but man, the level that people are discussing now, the level that is public in the kind of companies that are really out there doing it. We know Facebook has had their project, with the brain-computer interface, but they want to have more of a helmet type deal. They don't want to have a full, invasive thing. Look, they're trying to cover all levels. Another company, this is, again, the reason why I wanted to do this was to share with you the up-and-coming companies that we should probably keep an eye on. Also on the case is Los Angeles-based startup Kernel, founded by entrepreneur Brian Johnson, who made millions selling mobile payments company Braintree to PayPal, another guy who made technology for PayPal. Kernel, into which Johnson has put $100 million in, started as a neural implant company, but then pivoted to wearables because Johnson says the invasive road looked so long. Plenty of non-invasive methods exist for sensing and stimulating brain activity. Indeed, they form the basis for a large consumer neurotechnology industry, and none, says Johnson, is equal to being bridged into a next-generation interface. New ways are needed, and he believes Kernel has found one others have missed. Quote, "We will be ready to share more in 2020. So Kernel being another company to keep in mind. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a helmet. I'm not really sure what the in-between of jacking stuff into your physical brain and just wearing some kind of helmet. What's the in-between there? Maybe it's something where you have to shave your head and maybe have to be, in a pool of goo or something like that. And it ends with this idea of why Google Glass failed, not because it didn't work, but because people didn't want to wear a face computer. Which is partly true. Yeah, it was a face computer. It was ahead of its time. Now, the other story that I wanted to touch on, I'm sure you guys heard about it. It's everywhere in the mainstream outlets and media, or at least was a few days ago, which is the story about Google achieving quantum supremacy in this document that was leaked by NASA, which is, I mean, come on, you just get all the nefarious people and put them together and have them pull off this trick. Anybody else skeptical about this whole thing, guys? Am I the only one here that says maybe they achieved some kind of level of quantum thing, but every company must be tapped into projects that are claiming some kind of research in quantum mechanics? I mean, you have the largest machine in the world publicly, CERN, doing just that, testing the fabric of creation and trying to figure out the link between the quantum mechanics and legacy traditional model of physics, and trying to make it mesh, make it work, solve the equations. That's all taking place. Quantum computers are moving forward. We've talked about D-Wave and Gordy Rose suggesting that we're summoning entities. Well, most people in the public, in the technology sector anyway, didn't consider the D-Wave as a legit quantum computer. Oh man, the whole thing seems like a PR stunt. The entire thing, the entire quantum movement. And what I mean by that is, yes, there is this technological part of it. And certainly, once they actually figure out how to really harness quantum mechanics in a way where computing takes place, then it's over in a sense. The entire internet cracks, it breaks, because now you have this one centralized computer that can pretty much go anywhere. But that requires levels of computing that I don't think we're necessarily clear on. Us as a public, just a general public, we just don't know. We don't know exactly what's going on. But of course, throughout the years, we've noticed scientists mention things like reaching into another dimension, pull stuff out, and just wild things that used to be reserved for science fiction, but now it's cutting edge science, so to speak. Material science, which is always interesting, because something material has to manifest in order for it to be verified as being scientific. And really what I think is taking place is more so of a quantification of everything, even our minds, our thoughts. And the thing is, the only person that can actually process all the human thoughts and minds and everything that's happening, that's God. God is omnipresent. He's omnipotent, which means he is able to know every little detail of every little motion and movement of all creation. He is far bigger than each individual one of us. And to think that this quantum computer under the harnessed hand of man is going to somehow take over the world, well, when it does happen, how does it not fulfill Bible prophecy and this idea of an antichrist? And how does it not make sense that creation is so messed up at that point that God has to burn everything and bring down a new heaven and a new earth to establish the eternal kingdom? It's material, it's physical, but in this condition of the knowledge of good and evil, the fallen state that we're in, we're not actually meant to stay in this state eternally. And that's what a lot of this transhumanism stuff connected to all these computing mechanisms have to do with, is trying to live forever. And if it's mankind's ethics and morality and rationale and logic that gets programmed into these quantum computers, or the AI that runs on the quantum computers, then we're talking about a mixing of iron and clay that is quite remarkable, because now we're talking about human thoughts that are enhanced by the mysterious algorithms and various connection of numbers happening in the computer machine with AI. That symbiotic relationship is going to cause what I think, not just the mark, not just the worship of the image, but destruction of your soul, to the point where you seek death, can't find it, you're tortured forever and ever because that's the path you chose. That I think that's what's going to happen here. I think this idea of a literal hell, in a sense, is being created by some of these technologies. And so that's a long rant to say that this whole story seems bizarre to me. This whole thing seems like a PR test, some kind of simulation to see how people respond. Otherwise, why in the world is NASA leaking things? Oh, sorry. This kind of stuff does not happen, folks. This is for sure set up. This is for sure some kind of test to see what the public can take, to see the public reaction to a story like this. Because I think there are a lot of people who feel like it's over. You know, they're going to take over. It's Skynet. It's done. And I see those comments in the videos all the time, like, oh, what's the matter? It doesn't matter. It's all over. You know, and certainly in a sense, like, I understand that feeling. But I also see a lot of people who say, and I feel the same way, is that this means that Jesus is coming, man. He's going to come at some point very shortly. And I'm not putting a date on it. I'm not saying it's going to even happen within the next decade or century even. But where this stuff is going in terms of a certain segment of the population being involved with this technology at a very physical level, man, it is creating a very strange world that only the book of Revelation and other parts of prophecy in the Bible can relate to. It's so bizarre that it requires mythology to help explain, and maybe that's why the Bible has been shaded as this mythological book to begin with, because it seems like it's fantastic, like all the Greek mythos. It's all fantastic stuff. It's all made up stories. They're all just metaphors or analogies. And certainly at some level, yeah, I think they can be. But there's this reality of a supernaturalism, a powerful interlink between the metaphysical and the physical world today that manifested sometime back then in a really tangible way. And I think we're getting back to that place because this knowledge that we have leads us there. And ultimately, it is a struggle for your soul. It wants to quantify your soul so as to be trapped within the system that is going to be thrown into a lake of fire. But anyway, I think I've rambled enough here. I'm not going to even read this article because whatever, this is just the mainstream sort of way to look at it. And they're kind of saying, don't worry about it too much. There's all kinds of stuff that needs to happen still, that blah, blah, blah. Yeah, whatever. But this quantum supremacy title isn't really all that it's made up to be either. When you look at the technical details, it is it's a PR thing. So I really think this thing was a stunt purposefully done to measure and test public reaction, just like the War of the Worlds in 1938, the radio drama that freaked everybody out. I think this is the same tactic, folks, but we're seeing it today in 2019. It's AI and quantum computers. So anyway, that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you guys so much for your support. Check out the Patreon. Check out the Teespring store. I got a new design in there. It is the straight out of Genesis 6. I just thought it was funny and relevant because, of course, it does come straight out of Genesis 6, the Nephilim, the sons of God. It's all there. Pre-flood world. Understand that and you'll understand a lot of what's going on today. It's crazy, but it's true. And I got to get my website back up because it's down right now, certificates and whatnot. Thank you guys for hanging out through my ramble here. Have an awesome day. God bless.